Hello and welcome to another edition of the Book Review Blog. I am your book reviewer, and today we're going to review the book Go Ask Alice, and it's written by Anonymous. Um, I'm sure this is very familiar to a lot of people, whether you've read it or not. It's very pop culture-ish. Um, I knew kind of what it was about, but I didn't know, and I knew the pop culture that, this is a very popular book, so I wanted to read it, and that was why. And I'm glad I read it, kind of. It was very similar to, the Crank books that I've read, and so I thought, okay, wow, I'm reading all these drug books. It's, again, because it's written by Anonymous, the girl does not give her name, or she's 15, or her location. It's written in a diary, and usually I don't like diary writings or reading them, and so I'm really glad that I read this book via audiobook, because that's how I read the Diary of Anne Frank. Just hearing it is easier than reading it. But it's about a 15-year-old girl who lives with her parents and her brother and sister. Her parents are not named. Obviously, they're just mom and daddy. Her mom is, I'm guessing, a stay-at-home mom because she doesn't really give aspects to what her mom does. Her dad is a college professor, and originally they lived in the East somewhere, and they moved west at the very beginning of the book. And she has a brother whose name is Tim, and a sister named Alexandria, who they call Alex. And their location is not known. They live in the west somewhere. And at the beginning, or the book begins with the beginning or the end of school, and where she's starting in the East, and they learn that they have to move, and she's not looking forward to it because she doesn't want to leave her friends, and so eventually they move, and she doesn't like the house as at the beginning, or she doesn't like the area because, again, she doesn't know anybody, and she has to start a new high school, and that's tough on a girl or anybody. And so in the summer, when school ends, she goes and stays with her grandparents who live back east. And while she's there, she gets invited to a party. And the party is given by a friend, and whose name is given, but Jill, I believe, is her name. She's an old friend. And while she is there at the party, she drinks soda, and she starts to feel really weird, and she describes it that she starts to see colors and starts to see different objects that she doesn't know if they're there or not, and so she realizes that something is wrong and something happened. And so she asks Jill what happened, and Jill said, well, there were 15 glasses, let's say, and 10 of them we stuck an LSD pill in them. So, and she realizes that she got one of the drinks that was spiked with this LSD pill. So she went on basically an LSD trip. And thankfully, it was a good trip, I guess. There are good and bad. And so she's really kind of sad, feeling bad about it, because she's like, I'm a good girl, I don't do that kind of stuff. But while she's staying at her grandparents for the summer, she does still go with Jill, and Jill, it's almost like a weekend or a week kind of going on with these diary entries, because first she starts with LSD, then she moves on to speed, and then she moves on to acid, and it's just basically the same thing, but yet she goes through all like a plethora of drugs. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is really strange. And so, and again, in there, she smokes pot there as well, and she has kind of unprotected sex because she doesn't know if she's having sex or not, just because she's so drugged up. And she eventually her stay at her grandparents is over, and she goes back home, and she realizes that she doesn't like these drugs, and so she tries to stay away from them. But she starts school again, and she meets new girls and new friends who are also um, taking drugs as well, along like the LSD and pot and things like that. And she wants to stay away from them, but she doesn't, and she can't. It's very much like Christina and Frank, where she knows that this is wrong, and she really vows to stay away from it, but she can't. And just for one sense or another. And um, it's very, again, it's a diary thing, so she does not go on it for a long time, or she stays clean for quite a while, and she says, okay, this is where I'm going to be clean, and she starts a new diary, because she's like, this old one is where I was a drug addict and I really liked the stuff, but I knew that I had to stop, and so this new diary is going to be a fresh diary where I'm going to start anew and I'm not going to use it and things like that. So but through a couple of, she's never busted exactly, but she is caught, and she does go through, not rehab, but she goes through like a clinic where she kind of gets clean, and she along with the when she's kind of on drugs and things, she does run away from home twice. The first time she runs away with a friend, and they run off to California, and she lives in California for quite a bit, like about a month, and where she gets jobs, and she goes and meets other people who are also doing drugs. And I'm trying to base, she doesn't give the dates, obviously, or she gives like the month and the day, but never the year. But based on what's going on in the outside, I'm guessing it's like the 1960s, because they talk about the war, just that. They don't say Vietnam War or anything. They talk about that there's war protests going on. But again, the year is never given, but that's kind of what year I'm assuming, or what time of American history I'm assuming is going on. And then she also runs away on her own, and she runs off to Oregon, and she lives there again for a little bit, but then she's brought back home, and she's always brought home to loving family who love her, and they don't ever like yell at her for being an addict, or at least not in her diary, but and she's always grateful to have them and grateful to have her parents and family, and she's that's what helps her not want to do these drugs anymore, because they're hurting her family. She knows that, and she knows that they're not making her into a good person. So she stays clean for a very long time, and then, because it's very strange, because it's in the summer, and so it's, like July 25th. Oh, I had a great day. This happened. July 27th. Oh, I had an excellent day. This other thing happened. And then the next time, it's along with dates like that, there's also dates unknown. And I don't know if that's just because she isn't writing the dates in it, or whoever published this diary doesn't know the dates that when this happened. So then there's like one date unknown where all of a sudden she is in a hospital, and it takes several entries of more dates unknown to realize what happened. That she kind of like her first experience with LSD, where she drank something that she wasn't aware of that had it. She ate something that she didn't know was spiked with LSD, and unfortunately had a bad trip, as opposed to the good trip that she had the first time, where she ended up in a hospital, and then kind of ended up in a mental institution. So it's a very dark book, as you can imagine, kind of like the Crank, but it's way darker than Crank. This is kind of where I'm assuming we're kind of the ideas of Crank started, or the ideas of like these types of books started, because this is what I assumed this was kind of like the front runner of all of those books. And so I'm glad I read it for that matter. But kind of on the end with, I didn't like it again because there's a lot of drug use and it was very dark. But I'm glad I read it. So the next book that I'm going to read is the next edition of the Dark Tower series. It's the fourth one. It's called Wizard in Glass by Stephen King. So that's what I'm going to read next. And I bid you all a happy day and happy reading.